But I remember seeing that video, and I thought, oh man, that's a great voice on this guy, and the music was much more organic, and it's more down my alley. And then I can't remember when I did, but I realized that, oh God, this is the guy that did Snake Charmer. Because I think I found a single. I think that's what it was. I found a 45 of Snake Charmer, and it had Jon Hyatt's name on it. I said, well, I'll be damned. No wonder I liked it. And so I went to look for the album Slow Turning on cassette, of course, because it was the 80s. And I found Bring the Family. They didn't have Slow Turning at my local store. So I got Bring the Family. And I said, well, this guy. And I saw the band was Ry Cooder, Nick Lowe, Jim Keltner, all these names I knew, and I love Ry Cooder. So I bought it, and it just, I never looked back after that. It was astonishing to me.
Welcome to a new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, but tonight we are getting off the Bruce Springsteen train, though there is a Bruce Springsteen story that I'm going to ask my guest to tell. But we are going to Memphis in the meantime. Slow Turning. We are talking Jon Hyatt tonight. And as my regular listeners have known, I've done a couple of episodes based on Jon's music. I've had people join me to talk about it. And tonight, Michael Elliot, who has written a biography of the man himself, is joining me. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, it's nice to be here, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So before we get to the book, I always like to start at the beginning. So talk about, where did you grow up and what kind of music did your family listen to?
Well, in the introduction of my book, I talk about that, which is kind of probably a little out of character for most biographies. I started with a little autobiography, but I just wanted to give a background, little context about where I'm coming from. I grew up in Oxford, North Carolina, which is probably about 40 miles north of Raleigh, the capital city. And so it was a rural area, rural county. I grew up in town, but we were a very small town. And I helped my grandparents out. They were dairy farmers and educators too. But my other grandparents were tobacco farmers, and so worked in the tobacco field some. So I have that background as well. But grew up around music because everybody in my family loved music. My grandmother was a big country music fan. Charlie Pride, everybody from Webb Pierce on way back to Hank Williams. And then my grandparents, paternal grandparents, were more into jazz and classical music, opera, things like that. And then my father was a huge R&B soul fan. We're talking back in the days of Atlantic and Stax and soul and Motown and things like that. And my mother was a huge rock and roll fan, Chuck Berry, all that type of stuff. And Creedence was her favorite band in the late 60s when they came out. She was a big fan of them. And my dad also liked the Little Richard and all that stuff. So I grew up with all that around me. And then I had an uncle that lived with us who was 10 years my senior, so he was more like an older brother. And he had all the Led Zeppelins and Ted Nugent's and Foghat and all that stuff. So I grew up immersed in all this stuff. And then when I got old enough to start finding my own music, I believe Kiss was my first band that I was infatuated with when I was about 5 or 6 years old. But after that, I discovered Willie Nelson around 10 years old. For some reason, I just got into him really big. And then discovered Robert Johnson at the library. Most people probably heard him through Eric Clapton and thing, but I heard him just at the Richard H. Thornton Library in Oxford. You could check out records, and so I did, and I checked out the King of the Delta Blues Singers because it's such a cool looking, creepy cover, album cover, and I took it home, and it just blew my mind, and from there I just became immersed in the blues. But I also got into Springsteen during that same time. I was about 12, 13 years old, and right almost at the time that my local station, WQDR, who's now country, but back then they were rock, they would play Springsteen. This is before Born in the USA. And I think I remember the first thing I heard from him was either Badlands or something in that area. I know Spirit in the Night caught my attention, but I thought for a long time when I heard him on the radio, I thought Spirit in the Night was Van Morrison.
Yeah, oh, that's funny. That's great.
It was it had a moon dance feel, but then I got into, I was way into Springsteen, Cadillac Ranch, all that stuff. It was the river basically was out when I was getting into him. And so, I've been a huge Springsteen fan my entire life since then.
Well, so good. Well,
I'm talking to you.
Yeah, that is great. That we get to I do have to say though, I have heard a lot of diverse music because every guest I ask that question, but I think you check all quadrants more than anyone else ever has. I mean, but with the diversity of your grandparents and your parents, I mean, you got a wide palette of music. I grew up, I was born in 1959. My grandparents owned a dairy farm in Rose Pine, Louisiana. So, I remember Grandpa having to take a nap every day, and you had to be quiet because, he had to get up at dark 30 to go milk the cows. And I, when I was 11 or 12, I started in the afternoon. I helped him milk cows. I put in feed and, did all this. And so, and there was always a radio playing, partly to calm the cows and partly because he just loved music. But my grandparents and parents were definitely, both kinds of music, country and Western.
Right.
So, to use the Blues Brothers line, same thing, Hank Williams and Merle Haggard and Charlie Pride and, all these different, Roy Clark, Hee Haw, and the Johnny Cash show was mandatory viewing for us, to see. So absolutely. I asked this and I didn't put you that on the agenda, but now that you've told me, you mentioned hearing Bruce. Can you articulate what about him spoke to you?
I think it was the fact that when I first heard him, I was just discovering all kinds of rock and roll that I had and country from my parents and uncle and other, but this was when I was on a journey of self-discovery, and I was never one of those people who dismissed my parents or grandparents' stuff because it was theirs. I as a matter of fact, I valued it because I respected that stuff. I would read the liner notes and just absorb myself in that. And I think the thing I like about him was his lyrics, which ultimately brought me. Now I'm putting two and two together here, talking to you for the first time. I think it brought me to Jon Hyatt because it made me Bruce and Dylan. I got into Dylan around that same time when Infidels had just come out. And of course I knew of him from Blowing in the Wind and all that stuff, but this was the first new Dylan I really got into, and on MTV, they had the Sweetheart Like You video on. And so I was like, the lyrics are amazing, steal a little and they put you in jail, steal a lot and they make you king, and coupled that with Springsteen. I really started Springsteen and Dylan. I can't remember which one first, but those are the ones that really made me start listening to lyrics in rock songs. Before that, I was a big lyric fan with Willie Nelson. He was a great writer. And I always thought of, growing up with my grandmother, that country music had the stories and rock and roll just had the party and then the groove and the fun. But Springsteen made me realize that it could be literate as well, and of course Dylan. Those two artists really made me feel like, okay, there's something to say in this music too. And when Hyatt, when I discovered him a little later, I said, okay, well, here's another one that does the same thing. Mellencamp, not so much. He was in that ballpark as well, but he just didn't ring my bell like these other guys did. Oddly enough, even though I love Kenny Aronoff, his drumming is amazing, and I remember the Scarecrow album. I love Mellencamp because he had that kind of Stonesy vibe. So I like him musically more than lyrically, probably. But
and I like Bruce and his, putting out they just put out a song, Wasted Days, right now, that Wasted Time, I guess. And it really, you wonder why it took them so long to perform together, and two, they really sound good together. I mean, they do.
They do, and I was very pleased with the outcome of that. And what took them so long. And I saw where David Wild on Twitter had put he put out exactly what I was thinking before I could say it. He said, I know Bob Seger's somewhere going like, man, why wasn't I invited?
Oh, great point. Yeah. So you tell me which way to go first, because I want to go both places. Do you want to talk about why have you always wanted to be a writer and talk about that, or how you discovered Jon Hyatt first? Guest prerogative. Which one do you think is the chicken or the egg, right?
Yeah, well, I think I'll go with the writing, because I got oddly enough and funnily enough, I got a journalism badge in sixth grade.
Oh, nice.
That's
and so then from then it was set, right?
Well, I left. I would just write. I remember maybe I should post them at some point, but I have some old books I would write, and notebooks. I would write things in and draw. I would also be my own illustrator. One of the first books I wrote, quote unquote, was Willie Nelson, the story of Willie Nelson, and I drew pictures of him and threw out, and it is ridiculous. I was probably 12 years old, maybe 11, if that. But so I've always loved writing, but I'm a voracious reader. And it came from the liner notes. It came from reading liner notes on the backs of album covers from Dylan and Miles Davis. Everybody, and I learned how to speak the language of the music critic, I guess, because I love reading Greil Marcus and Peter Guralnick and Lester Bangs. It's the same thing that happened with me in radio. I got into radio because I loved hearing the DJs talk, and I just wanted to talk like them, and I got turned on the radio and started talking like them, turn on microphone. So that it's not mimicking so much as just being inspired by them. And that's what I would always write little reviews if nobody would read them but me. And just like I would make mixtapes for myself, when I was a kid, and holding the little cassette player up to the radio speaker and making and recording off the radio. And so all that stuff I was immersed in. So it was always music. It was always listening or writing about it. But I didn't do anything. I never got paid a dime for writing. I would just, when the internet came along, I joined this group called progressiveears.com that they would write about progressive rock and things like that. And it was just a group. It was a forum. And so we'd get on there and discuss and argue about groups. And I would add record reviews to their little review section. And I got some good feedback on that. And I thought, well, that's cool. And then from there, when I left radio in 2013, I went into other line of work in communications. And I remember doing shift work, and I would work overnights, had nothing to do at the job I was at. So I just started writing there, submitting to different publications, and next thing you know, they're accepting it. And so yeah, that's what started me on my journey, what got me to where I am now.
So what else? Obviously, we're going to get to your book. But I take it you'd been published other places and had done other work.
Yeah, it's been a quick journey. I got after I got out of radio and I started into another career, I started submitting. It was only 2018, about 3 years ago. I started submitting to No Depression, and then No Depression contacted me and said, "Well, we like your stuff, and we're going." At the time, anybody could submit to them. It was like an open forum type of thing, a certain part of their website. And I'd been reading them since '95. They were the Roots alt country periodicals, but so I was a big fan of them. And then I just started submitting little reviews and stuff. And so the next thing I know is they're contacting me saying, "Hey, we're going to go to, only nobody can just post to our website anymore. We're just going to go strictly to a journalistic thing, and we'd like for you to join because we like what you've been writing." So I was like, whoa, I was like,
yeah, sure.
ultimate validation, and so that gave me the confidence. I just started submitting to other places and request, wanting to join the team. And Pop Matters felt the same way, so I joined them. And Albumism, Justin Chadwick's stuff. He does some great work. And Americana UK, same thing. So yeah, I just started writing for all these guys, folks, and submitting reviews. I do interviews and features and things like that. And The Bitter Southerner, that's another thing I wrote for. They were actually the first people to ever publish me. Chuck Reese published my first little piece where I talked about Robert Johnson, Willie Nelson, Elvis Presley.
Oh, nice.
And how they're intertwined. But yeah, so it's just been a journey that's taken me many places over the last just 3 years. And it's probably something I couldn't have done before the internet,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you about Jon Hyatt, but just in 1980, I started dating Linda, who I am married to now. She had a good friend named Jennifer, and Jennifer's boyfriend was Rick. And Rick loved Jon Hyatt.
Mm-hmm.
Slugline was just the 8-track that he adored. And in fact, when him and Jennifer broke up, he showed up at Linda's house and give me back my Slugline 8-track. And then they ended up getting back together. And so therefore, I listened to Slugline. It was interesting. And then we kind of stuck with it. And then like everyone else, when Bring the Family, he went to another level. So Rick died a few years ago, and unexpected, he had a brain aneurysm. And one of the last gifts he died in February. On January 9th, for my wife's birthday, he actually gave her a small MP3 player, one of the iPod minis that had every Jon Hyatt album on it. That gave her that. He gave her that as a birthday present. After Rick died, every time John would come to Dallas, I'd say, "Hey, do you want to go see him?" And Linda goes, "It's too soon. It's too soon." And so he was playing a solo acoustic show a few years ago, House of Blues. And Linda said, "I think it's time." So we went, and we cried a little. We enjoyed the show. Linda said, "I feel like Rick's sitting next to us." Yeah. And then so to celebrate my 60th birthday, we actually drove down to Austin. He was playing at the Paramount Theater, and we got to see him once again, solo acoustic. Love him with a band, but there is something. He is a very good storyteller and a good musician of just him alone on stage. If Kiss was in high school, I was obsessed with Kiss in 1977. Quickly discovered Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys. They were my first musical obsession. Discovered Springsteen and kind of saw him perform live the first time, and that put me into my ultimate, and now I do a Springsteen podcast. Right. But Jon Hyatt is someone that has been, ever since '80, part of my musical life. I can remember wearing out the Riding with the King cassette, just loving this. And we've seen him multiple times. In fact, we got to meet him once right after Bring the Family. He had recently gotten sober, and we didn't know that. So, Rick was like, "Hey, can we buy you a drink?" "No, I'm good. I'm good." And just so anyway, that's why when I'm reading the book now, it is so insightful. It's Have a Little Faith, the Jon Hyatt Story. So first off, thank you for telling the story of someone who's been such part of my life. So tell me how you discovered Jon and why a book of Jon.
Yeah, I was. Well, thank you, and that was a wonderful story. Um, I'm sorry for your loss, and I understand. I can empathize with that, and wonderful story. And Jon does that to people. He'll bring them together, and
Yeah.
he'll definitely knock you out in concert,
Yeah.
make you have all the feels, as they say. And I was about 15, and I would listen. Like I said, I almost had started in radio. I started in radio when I was 15, about a month shy of my 16th birthday. But before that, I was listening to the college radio station WKNC in Raleigh, and they were in NC State, and they were playing this song called "Snake Charmer," and I remember, it was '85, so everything sounded really processed and slick, and it was a lot of keyboards everywhere, so I was used to that. I never liked it, but I was like, well, this is just the way it is now. All my heroes, with the exception of maybe Springsteen, except when Dancing in the Dark came out, it's the hell is this, it was my no, not you, Bruce, no. But then I warmed up to it. I was like, well, these lyrics are incredible. So, and I'm fine with it now. But so I heard this real processed music coming out, but the singer knocked me out. I say he's got a great voice. It sounded so mischievous, and he had a real rasp and blues voice. It sounded like a blues singer singing over a really stiff rock beat.
Yeah.
But I thought, I got to remember this guy, and I never really got his name when I heard that song. They were college station. They went off to play Husker Du after that. I don't know. And so, but it wasn't. It ended up being a soundtrack to a movie, White Nights. But then I got to Taylor Hackford movie, as a matter of fact. But after that, I think it wasn't Bring the Family, it was Slow Turning. I saw him, it was either on CMT or TNN. I don't even know if CMT was around then, but the Nashville Network, I think they were playing a little video show, and I think that's where I saw Slow Turning. It was either on that or VH1, but it wasn't MTV, so it's probably VH1. But I remember seeing that video, and I thought, oh man, that's a great voice on this guy, and the music was much more organic, and it's more down my alley, and then I can't remember when I did, but I realized that, oh God, this is the guy that did Snake Charmer. Because I think I found a single. I think that's what it was. I found a 45 of Snake Charmer, and it had Jon Hyatt's name on it. I said, well, I'll be damned. No wonder I liked it. And so I went to look for the album Slow Turning on cassette, of course, because it was the 80s. And I found Bring the Family. They didn't have Slow Turning at my local store. So I got Bring the Family, and I said, well, this guy. And I saw the band was Ry Cooder, Nick Lowe, Jim Keltner, all these names I knew, and I love Ry Cooder. So I bought it, and it just, I never looked back after that. It was astonishing to me. That it was roots music, like I'd heard Mellencamp doing the type of thing, and all stuff, but it was so raw and rocking. I didn't know at the time that it was an album recorded in 4 days, and it was all live from the floor, and all the vocals were live, with minimal rehearsal. I didn't know all that. All I know is it just sounded good. And then I realized, I was like, oh, this is the song that Bonnie Raitt did, that thing called Love Song, and had a neat little bridge in the middle that she didn't do. It was a cool little surprise for me. And every song on it was better than the one before it. It just kept coming. And by the end of it, I was exhausted. Now, keep in mind, I was 17 when I got that album. And I was just completely floored, and it was not music for my. Look back, and it's kind of silly to say, but I don't think it was music made for my generation. It was music by a grown man singing about grown-up things, and it was an album that celebrated monogamy, adulthood, and facing it head on. It wasn't all just happy saccharine stuff, because it had some really, really hard truths that you had to face. Stood up, and your dad did is a real snarky look at.
Yeah, I was lucky enough. He was playing at the Lakewood Theater here in Dallas, and I can't remember the tour now, but he did a long story in the middle of your dad did about watching the Beatles and his dad, and and everything, and going crazy. And it's a stretch, but I think in a little bit that album is like Springsteen's Tunnel of Love, right? Like, it is a grown-up album. It is about relationships. It is about that.
Same year,
yeah, it is. Just an absolutely wonderful album. And so, please continue.
Yeah, that was a good point. It's a good parallel to draw, because I think at that time, a lot of the people their age, because I think Springsteen and John are about the same age, if not almost exactly the same age. Maybe Springsteen's a little older. But it's funny. Here's a little nerdy side point.
Yeah. We love that.
Yeah. In Learning How to Love You, John says, I'm 34 years old now. And Springsteen on My Hometown says I'm 30. Was it 35?
Yeah.
But both of them say the age right around the same age. It's just a few years apart. So, boy, well, I'm moving out on this podcast. I love it.
No, Hyatt was born in 52, according to Wikipedia.
Yep.
And Springsteen was 49, just because I was born in 59, and I knew, so yes, very close to the same age.
Very close.
Exactly.
They had very similar experiences. And he, of course, Springsteen had the New Jersey thing, but I grew up in the Midwest, Indiana, yes. But they both had difficult fathers.
Yes.
I think, and so it's a very similar thing. Of course, Hyatt is one of 7, but he's got that Catholic background.
Yes, just like Springsteen. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there's a lot of parallels between the two.
There is. I never thought about it. Stolen Moments is, if I have to be pushed, that's my favorite Hyatt CD. I just love.
Really?
Yeah, I love that CD, and part of it is because I had it on CD at my job, and I had an office back then, and I was writing reviews. And so I put in the CD, put it on repeat, and I worked like 3 or 4 hours, like into the night. Like I told Linda, hey, I've got to stay and write these reviews. So like from like 6 to 10, I just had that on repeat and just did background music. And also I just love The Rest of the Dream and Seven Little Indians, and just a lot of favorite albums, a lot of great things. But when I push to shove, I think that would be my favorite CD, my favorite release of his.
It's funny, when I first heard Stolen Moments, real time, I went and bought it, and I was disappointed because
interesting.
After the rawness of Bring the Family and Slow Turning, I thought Stolen Moments was rather slick, and it was all because they brought in, Glenn Johns brought in a different engineer from the previous 2 albums, and it was just made it more radio friendly and pop friendly. Now I look back on it, and it's aged very well. It's aged better than I thought it would. And I was listening back when I was writing this book, and I thought, well, I learned to relove that album. And I've always loved parts of it, like Real Fine Love, Seven Little Indians. Seven Little Indians is, of course, autobiographical. It's probably his most nakedly autobiographical song.
Absolutely.
But, it was more of it had a very Daniel Lanois feel to it. I was like, what in the world is going on here? I love it, but the stuff like the title track, and a couple of other pieces there. It took me a moment to get over there, because Stolen Moments, the song is just straight up pop, you know.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. But I really love, I mean, you can't argue with Through Your Hands, one of his best written songs ever. And things like that. It's just and Rest of the Dream, very pop too, but it's, I love the happiness. It's very happy, very happy. He was very content at that time.
Yeah. So you're kind of going along with this tour, and you know, he is not a household name.
No.
Now, a lot of his songs are songs that people know, right? That, and I often have to say, well, well, Bonnie Raitt, or, and, Roseanne Cash and other people. So, and I've recently, over the past 3 years, discovered Lily, and she has a unique voice, and in her own way is doing a really great career. And I heard them interview, right? They did an interview together, and he talked about how tough it was during this pandemic. He, like, how do you as a young person get out there and, because she had a new CD, how do you promote it? So so you've discovered Jon, and you're going on the journey. What led to a book?
Well, when it, okay, let me think. Okay, so I was writing and submitting stuff to people, and then like I said, I'm working the graveyard shift, and just a lot of time to kill, getting my job done, but it just wasn't much to do.
I understand.
So I read about, I do a lot of reading and research, and I read about 33 1/3 books, and I thought, okay, well, this is a series that takes an entire album, and a book will just focus on one album. So they have many books out, and they have open calls for submissions once every couple or 3 years. And so it just so happened that one came up right around this time, and I was reading what they require for proposals. I'd never written a book proposal in my life. I never even thought about writing a book. I was just writing these little reviews, and then I thought, why not? Because I was a huge, Bring the Family was probably one of my top 5 favorite albums of all time. So, and I noticed they had no Jon Hyatt, and I thought, well, Bring the Family is just an amazing topic for a book, because you could go into why he wrote these songs, you could go into what was going on in his life, you could go into each band member's career, which is amazing on their own. They each deserve a book. And so I sent a proposal in, and I didn't make it, so I thought, oh well, so first time try, it's okay. But I thought, I put all this work and effort into it, why don't I shop it around to other places? So I started looking up other publishers by publishers of books. I was just looking at books that I've really loved reading recently, and the Guy Clark book I loved, and so I sent it to their publisher. I love the Delbert McClinton book. I sent it to their publisher. Might have been the same one, I can't remember, but I know I sent it to the University of Texas and Texas A&M. I sent it to those two guys, and they got back with me and said that they're considering it, and they appreciate me getting it. So I at least had a response from them. And then the third, I was in the middle of reading a Robert Johnson book by D.L. Dean Wardlow and Bruce Conforth, Up Jumped the Devil, and it was from Chicago Review Press. So I thought, well, this is a great book. And then I looked that Stanley Booth had been, they had put some books out by him, and he had written, including the True Adventures of the Rolling Stones, which is like a Bible of Rolling Stones stuff. And I love Stones. So I I said, okay, let me try them. And within 5 minutes after I sent an inquiry, their editor got back with me and said, hey, we're interested. Let's see a proposal. And my wife and I were sitting at the table. I said, is this real? Is this happening? So then I had to go and look at their submission guidelines and rewrite my proposal and send it to them. Within 2 weeks or so, she said, we're a go. We want you to write not only bring the family, we think, we should do a full biography of him. And I said, okay, that's fine with me.
Wow.
But then after I said, okay, then I panicked. I thought, oh no, I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk to him. I was ready to write a book without his approval, but or without his participation. I mean, but I didn't want to. I would rather have his participation. So therein started the journey of trying to get people to talk to, because I know that biographies are written all the time without the participation of the subject, but I would rather read.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I've read some great ones where they didn't participate, but more often than not, if they participate, it's better.
Yeah.
So and it just worked out where more and more people started talking to me simply because nobody had written a book about him before, and which floored me. I kept looking around for anything written about him, but book-wise, but no, it's just music books, song books,
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, well, and so I started asking around his outer circle of people, and then they started saying, yeah, it's about time somebody wrote a book about him. And some people were a little standoffish, and like, is this authorized? And I'm like, well, I'm working on that. But I didn't want an authorized biography, so to speak, because I didn't want it to look like it was just a sycophant writing about it.
Right.
I didn't want it to be a hagiography or anything like that. I just wanted to, I wanted to tell a true story. I wanted it to be raw, because he had a tragic life, but and it's one of resilience and overcoming all these things. So one Sunday morning, I'm laying in bed with my wife. We had just woke up. We're having a coffee, and it was like 8:00 Eastern time. I get an email from his manager saying, "I manage Jon Hyatt. I hear you're writing a book about my client. Tell me more." And I looked at my wife and I said, honey, this man, it's 7:00 Nashville time.
Yeah.
And he's earning his money.
Yeah.
So I crafted an email, and I just basically sold the idea, saying that I would love to have Jon participate because I believe in his story. It's one of resilience. It's one where he overcame so much tragedy to not only survive, but to thrive. And he became artistically superior to anything else he had done before, after he cleaned up and after all this tragedy had happened. And so I thought that's the story that needs to be told, because so often we glamorize the decadence and the hedonistic lifestyle of rock and roll, but we seem to just not pay any attention to it after somebody goes through all that and cleans up and then still has plenty to say. Not only that, but says it better than they ever did before. And that's exactly what he does. And and it needed to be told. It needed to be told that I believe that, true rebellion, and rock and roll is shaped by rebellion, but true rebellion, when you're in that field, is to say no, is to say, I'm not gonna get drunk and fall off the stage. I'm gonna do this clean and sober, and I'm gonna feel what I'm singing. Because you can, people could say what they want, but because I was there, I've been there. I've sang in cover bands and things like that for many years, and I drank, and I was an alcoholic. I was one of the binge drinker types. I wasn't a daily alcoholic like Jon was. I was once I start, I couldn't stand up after one until 20 had me down on the floor. That was basically me. And as he sings, but that I knew that standing on the stage clean and sober and feeling everything you're singing, that takes a lot more guts than just being drunk and and trying to hide and run away from your problems by drowning it in alcohol or drugs, So, but I think that's a story worth telling. And so thankfully they agreed, and that's where we are. Yeah.
Because I'm thinking of Jason Isbell,
Mm-hmm.
who is very vocal about his sobriety. And in fact, on one of his latest albums, right, it gets easier, but it's not easy, or, I'm missing the title of, but a great song talking about, his addiction and how it's always there. And I've never had a substance abuse problem, but I have struggled with my weight my whole life, and so that, and I think we all have our own demons that you can talk about that. And I do think it's an amazing story, the tragedy that he had. I just recently listened to, I knew I was going to talk to you, and so I did a search for Jon Hyatt podcasts, and he was interviewing a couple of years ago, or maybe last year, and he talked about how his addiction saved him as a child, yet he had to then move past it, right? It helped him lose weight. It helped him do this, which I thought was fascinating, because I'd never heard anyone be thankful for the drugs and alcohol.
That's right.
Then understanding that then they served a purpose at the time, and then I needed to let it go. Mm-hmm. So I take it you got to visit with him. Was it through emails? Did you get to spend time? Talk to me a little bit about that.
The funny thing is, after I spoke with his manager and we set up a time, he said, "Okay, John will speak with you." And that was like one of the biggest moments of my life. I'm like, wow, I can't believe this.
Yeah, sure.
I'd gotten to interview many people on my radio career, but it's one thing to be interviewed through radio. The station is doing it, and you're representing the station. It's another thing. It's freaking you,
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, what? So, but he said, let's set up a time in March. This was in January of 2020. He said, let's set up a time in March. You can fly out here to Nashville or some, meet with him, and hang out and we'll talk. Well,
dun, dun, dun. Based on that timeline, I can almost write the rest of this story.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, that just, it shut everything down everywhere. So, my little problem was, poor thing, you can't fly out to Nashville and talk to one of your idols.
Right.
So I took it in stride, but at the same time, I was a little disappointed. And
sure,
of course, and then Hyatt, it was a few months went by, but I kept talking to other people in his circle. And then he finally got up with me, and we talked by phone, and we ended up having long conversations over the phone, and that's what formed his part of the book, and the thing that really struck me from the beginning when he started talking to me was how he was, how open he was, and how happy. And I'm sorry, hang on one second.
Sure.
That was my wife.
Okay. Hey.
The one thing that struck me was that he was so open and so forthcoming about his life, and he'd notoriously been private most of his life. When in interviews, he had his talking points, and he would go over them, and if you listen to a lot of his interviews back then or before before this book, it all starts sounding the same, and it's like, okay, I know where he's going with this, I know what story he's telling, and all that. But so I knew what not to ask him, because I knew all that stuff already, you know? And so I started going into a little deeper, and he started going in deeper with me, and he went way deep, and I thought, oh my, okay, we're going here. And, he had never talked about his abuse before, I don't believe. And from his brother. And so that was a huge eye-opening moment and it put everything, so many things in context. And it's interesting you mentioned about that, about what he said about it, alcohol, because yeah, it did save his life to begin with. And it's just, it shows um the complexity of the human condition, because
Yes.
not everything is black and white. There's so
Yeah.
much gray, and there's so much nuance. One can say, well, drugs are bad, or alcohol is bad, but they, as you said, they serve their purpose when they were
Yeah.
there when he needed it to be. But he had the struggles with weight. Is just like
Yeah.
he and his dad, as well. His whole family, he said, were
Right.
overweight to an extent. But
Which is hard to, he's so thin now.
mhm,
Yeah, but
yeah,
when you see him,
yeah,
he is just such a thin. Yeah.
yeah. And it was a girl that made him lose it. But it's one thing. It's one thing to lose it. It's another thing to keep it off. And
Yes.
so throughout his life, he is just, when he sets his mind to it, I guess, like a lot of us are, if you set your mind to it, maybe
Yeah.
sometimes it'll work out. But he has an amazing willpower that he has exhibited over and over again. And the stuff he's been through with not only that, his brother killed himself, when John was 11, and he was just, 10 years older, roughly. And then he lost his second wife, his strange second wife, to suicide.
Yeah.
So he's got a lot of that baggage that he carries with him, but it just makes you who you are. And his lyrics and his music is all the more powerful because of that. I believe he is somebody that is a sympathetic character, because people can relate, and people can also know that, well, he's been through this, he's done this and that, and we
Yeah.
can. It makes his music just deeper, and it's a, yeah. You talked earlier about, you don't hear him on the radio much. He's not as a household name, but his songs speak to many people.
Yes, they do.
His voice, for whatever reason, it could be, some, he would blame record company disinterest for early on,
Yeah.
but other, he's got one of those voices that's not, it's not a pretty boy voice or anything like that.
No.
It's going to be, it's a little rough around the edges. So he's not for everybody, but his songs are.
One of my favorite stories is early. My wife, Linda, has a friend, Lisa, who in fact, Lisa is the first person I ever heard talk about Bruce Springsteen. She had gone to school on the East Coast, and she had come back to Lake Charles, Louisiana. This is around like 79, 80. And she was talking about this guy, Bruce Springsteen, that she was hearing about because she was going to school at the East Coast. But my wife is talking to her and says, yeah, this Elvis Costello guy sounds a lot like Jon Hyatt. And Lisa's like, no, no, no. Jon Hyatt sounds like Elvis Costello.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah,
That was
yeah,
quite fun.
yeah. And I wonder, like, it, just on a side note, right? Like, Memphis in the Meantime, wonderful song, has a line, I don't believe Ronnie Millsap's ever going to record this song. And then Ronnie Millsap did record it, and I wonder if just John thought of that and just smiled, just cracked him up.
Yeah.
And now then, he changes which musician is not going to do the song.
Right.
It's another favorite story of mine is when he was at Lakewood, and he had played in Houston the night before, and he says there were astronauts from NASA at the show, and they had said they played Blue Telescope up on the space station. He said, and I got all excited and I forgot to play it for him last night. So I'm going to play it for you guys tonight, saying that this is for the guys in Houston. So I think he has a very passionate, loyal fan base. And I'd love to hear if you can add anything about this, but I remember Lily, his daughter, talking about that she's more bitter than he is that he's never won a Grammy. like that angers her. And he's like, it just, he almost feels like, and maybe you can tell me, he feels like, I had a good career. I've gotten to sing music for a living, and it's all good.
I think it's where he is in life now, because I think that's why he decided to open up. I mean, who am I? Why did he decide to open up? I think it's because it's where he is now, and he's accepted who he is, where he is, and he is no longer. I think it was Rosemary Clooney who said one time, I don't sing like you have nothing else to prove. You just,
great line.
Yeah, you don't try so hard. It's just, and that's where he is now, and he's accepted it. And I think that he's nominated for a Grammy coming up this year with Leftover Feelings, he and Jerry. So I've got my fingers crossed.
Oh yes, me too.
And I'm sure that in the 80s he would have loved and lapped up all the accolades he could get. And I know it was frustrating. The man was dropped from 3 labels before he ever made Bring the Family, and he had nothing at that point. No label, no. He only had Lily before he met Nancy. But so there, I'm sure he would have loved the attention then. But now, you get to a point where you realize you're not going to be a Billboard top 10 artist, right. and at 69, 70 years old, he'll be 70 this coming year, but he's not going to hit that mark. But he is artistically respected and critically acclaimed and all that. He's made it to that summit, and so that's I think that is probably more satisfying, because that's more long lasting than
I know. Like, as a fan, I was sad that Springsteen's Letter to You did not get nominated for a Grammy. I think he could care less, but as a fan, I hated. I said there's another world where that his version at Western Stars, the film, he did a cover of Rhinestone Cowboy. In another world, another time, Bruce Springsteen singing Rhinestone Cowboy would have hit the country charts. Yep. Right. But that's not the world of our radio nowadays. No. And it just, they're okay with that. I am surprised that Bruce and John never connected and did anything together. But you tell a story very early in the book about the Stone Pony. Do you remember the story?
It was that's the closest he ever came to doing a duet.
Yes.
He walked into I think it was the Bottom Line. He walked into the bar, and John and White Limbo were playing, and this was around the time with Slug Line, Two Bit Monster, and Howie Epstein was I believe that was when he was playing bass for him, and he was doing a version of Fight the Power, the Isley Brothers song. And Denny Bruce, one of the most colorful guys I talked to in the book, was his manager and producer at the time. And he was standing there, and Bruce comes walking through the club and just kind of pushes his way through everybody, to get to the dressing room. And Denny reaches out his hand saying, "Hey, Bruce." And he just walks right by him, and shuts the door. People have stuff on their mind, and plus he's the boss. So what are you going to say?
Yeah.
So, and Denny said, I was a little disappointed, but lo and behold, a few days later, Stephen Tetch, who was his guitar player at the time, was walking down the boardwalk with a member of Southside Johnny and the Asbury Dukes, and he said, "Hey, the boss, the guitarist for Southside Johnny, said the boss really dug y'all's version of Fight the Power the other night." So he was apparently in the dressing room listening, and caught his attention. So that's some good validation right there.
Yeah. Now, according to the internet, which is never wrong, November 2nd, 2014. Or 2014. Supposedly, Bruce did Slow Turning for a sound check in Adelaide, but there
Oh,
is no recording of it. That during the sound check before Adelaide, Australia, he played that. And then John did do a version of Johnny 99 from
yes,
Springsteen's Nebraska,
that's
which
right.
I think he did a really good version of it, it's a really good Springsteen song for him to do. It fits his style.
Yes,
So
yes,
yeah,
it does. You know, it's funny, and I might get a little heat from this, but I'm not a big fan of John's cover versions of songs. I mean,
yeah,
I love some of them, but I
yeah,
think he is much more powerful when he's doing his own stuff.
yeah. I agree with that.
And I think because now he did a great version of a Bottle Rocket song, Welfare Music, which I think he did a fantastic
Yeah,
version. He did a pretty good version of Curtis Lowe, the Skynyrd song with Mo, but it wasn't, it's not something I would ever want to listen to out of pleasure again. It's just,
yeah.
it
Well,
was
and
it was.
when Bruce was on the American Movie Classics or TNT Classics, right? He did an introduction for the Searchers and another movie, and the guy asked him, "Why have you never done, like a covers album or a standards?" And Bruce said, "I don't have that good of a voice." He said, "My
Mhm.
talent is coming from writing," and
Mhm.
and and I know that I would love to hear John do versions of stuff, but I'd love to hear Bruce do it, but it is unique perspective. And I going back to success, you know, I have we ever counted how many people did a cover of Have a Little Faith in Me? I
Yeah.
mean, just I don't know if you can.
Dozens at least. I mean, it's just become a
Yeah,
modern standard. But yeah, and I think going back to that, I think John is so expressive and his voice is so
yeah,
expressive when singing his own words that
yes,
it's just it doesn't come off as he's feeling the other people's stuff. It comes
yeah,
off
I
like
agree.
it's kind of like he's a karaokeing it, and I love his voice, but it's better suited to his own material.
Yeah.
And Have a Little Faith. I mean, no matter who does it, he nobody can touch his version.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
even the great Joe Cocker.
Yeah.
He did a great version, but doesn't have that soul that Hyatt put into it.
When two stories about that. The first time we saw him, he was at a little club in Ellen's Redo in Dallas, Texas, and it was, he by himself. He had a piano and a guitar, and it was a very small crowd. That was the one where we met him afterwards, and at the time, I had been laid off from my job. One of many times I'd been laid off, and I was throwing papers in the morning to try to make extra money. And he started doing Have a Little Faith in Me, and I started crying because the idea, and Lynn and I at the time had been married probably 5 years, and I'm like, am I disappointing her? Gosh, I haven't been able to keep a job, and I'm having to do all this, and just the whole, when he starts on the end where he's like, doing the end of Have a Little Faith in Me, where he extends it, just brought me to tears. And truly a great song. The other moment is earlier this year, I had a friend on who is a huge Aaron Sorkin fan, just like me. And we each picked our top 5 musical moments from Aaron Sorkin shows. And I picked Studio 60, one of them, when they played To Have a Little Faith on Me with that montage. And was
Yeah,
such a surprise that, oh my gosh, they're doing Hyatt, and it's such a wonderful place.
yeah.
Um, is there anything that didn't make the book that you wish you could have?
Oh, there's plenty.
Yeah,
Regrets, I've had a few, but
yeah,
I wish I had. I wish I had. Yeah, this is just shop
Yeah.
talk. I wish I had thrown a few more pictures in there that I'd gotten, but I just didn't have time. This is this came about quickly, and I talked, interviewed people and wrote it down, and I did at the time. I was like, I don't really care about putting pictures in there, but I did attempt, and Denny Bruce was wonderful at getting me pictures, and I got a few from Gil Rosenberg and David McClister and Jack Spencer did great cover work, but I just didn't. I really regret not asking. I felt my confidence was just, I had talked to John so much, and he had opened up so much. I felt bad about asking him for anything else, but I remember thinking, I wish I would have asked him or Nancy, who was wonderful to talk to, for some pictures, old family pictures or something, but I was a little shy then by about that time. So that's the regret. But I think I don't know. Other than that, I think I pretty much covered everything I was planning to cover.
Do you know if he's read the book?
Yes, I do know.
And
I do know because while it wasn't authorized, his manager said, John would like to see the book before you send it out. He said not, and he made sure to say not to change anything of any subject, just to make sure, fact check, and I thought, well, that's fair enough. But I tell you what, that was the longest weekend I've ever had. I sent it off on here was my tactic. I sent it off on a late Thursday afternoon saying the deadline was like Monday. And I said, could we have this back on Sunday evening? And so hopefully he'll skim through it and not. And Sunday afternoon, I got an email, and my wife said, let me read it, and from his manager, and she said, and it was just one sentence, because that's the way his manager talks. He's a great guy, but he's very curt and to the point. He said, book's good to go. So
that's nice.
That's and it was like a huge weight lifted off of me. But so he's not only that, but he's been signing it at his shows. He's got it for sale at the merch table.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he took it on tour with him, and as a matter of fact, they ordered more. So
that is nice. That's got to feel good.
It does.
Yeah.
So the book is actually slated for a reprint, a second printing. It's coming out, and the paperback is coming out next fall of 2022. So that's good news too. So it's been doing very well.
Good.
I hope that it is spread. It's funny, you said earlier, I've had to talk to when I talk to my family and friends, I said, you wrote a book? And I said, yeah. And it's a biography of who? And I just hold my breath, and Jon Hyatt. And they go, who? So Bonnie Raitt, Thing Called Love.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, Angel Eyes, Jeff Healey Band, and then I have to go into he's written for Paula Abdul and Iggy Pop, and they're like, what?
Great cover. Where did you get the photo from for the cover?
Jack Spencer. He sent a few pictures to me. I asked him if he had any, and he had taken pictures of Hyatt for the Mystic Pinball album and the Open Road album, and a few others. And the one I chose there, he had his hands folded, and it was a previously unreleased photo from the Mystic Pinball cover. And I thought, oh my God, he's holding his hands like he's praying. And so I said, I want this to be the cover. I sent it to my publisher, and they agreed. They said, well, hey, this looks good enough to be a cover. And then the back cover, David McClister, that was the actual photo that was on the back of cover of the Eclipse Sessions. And I love that. And I said, this should be the back cover. And they agreed. So I was like, the more I read about first time authors, or just authors in general, said they usually don't have much to do with the artwork of the album. And I was very fortunate to be able to pick the front and back cover here. and then a big a boon to everything was Elvis Costello.
Well, that was my next question. First off, I'm going to tell you, are you okay on time?
Yeah, I'm okay right now. Just a few more minutes.
Okay, that's good. So once again, have a little faith. The Jon Hiatt Story, Michael Elliot, the Elvis Costello did the foreword. How did that happen?
Luck, but
luck. Yes.
I sent. I was thinking about, after a while, you get all these people on board. After John got on board, I talked to people from his outer circle, but after he got on board, it was like Katie barred the door. It was everybody started participating. People that said no. I only had one or two that turned me down to begin with, but they came back and they said, "Okay, we'll do it." I did have a couple of guys that turned me down altogether, but heck with them. But I love them still, but I don't want to put them on the spot here. But I still love them. But I thought, well, after I got everybody done and the book written and it was submitted, I believe it was submitted. Yeah. I thought, why don't I try to get somebody who would I get to write the forward, and I'm getting brave at this point because
sure.
and so I said, why don't I try Elvis Costello, because he and Hyatt have such a long history together, and their careers have paralleled so much, and I thought it would be hilarious, really, in a kind of just in a subtle way. And sure enough, I sent an email to his management asking him. And of course, you get to go through the whole spiel of who's participating already. And management got back with me, and they said, this is just how fate works. They said his mom. He said, we'll ask him. But his mom just died yesterday. She was 99. And I thought, oh my God, of all the terrible timing, and I felt terrible. But they said, no, we'll just, just letting you know, it'll be a little bit,
Yeah.
So I didn't put anything in it, but a few weeks later, they said, Elvis has written a beautiful foreword for you, and he's in the editing process right now. And I was floored, and I don't know if it was because he was feeling sentimental, and if that had just got him at the right time. I don't know. But I thanked him for it. He wrote a beautiful. It forward.
Is a beautiful introduction. Yeah. What's next?
Well, I got a few irons in the fire, and I really can't say because I haven't.
I understand.
I don't really know exactly which way to go. There are a couple of really exciting things that I have but I don't know which way to go. So that's good. I got options right now, but I will keep you informed.
Yeah. Where Jon Hyatt, have a little faith, a Jon Hyatt Story. Where I assume available everywhere books are sold.
That's right. Everywhere you want to get a book, you can order it. It's Have a Little Faith, the Jon Hyatt Story. And you can, I suggest going to your local bookstore.
Absolutely.
You can, they'll order it for you. Supply chain being as it is, it might take a little while, but it's available at the big box places too. So,
good. All right. I'm not going to keep you long, but I do have to ask you the Mary question. So this is how I end every episode. So for those of you who've stuck around, here's your little Bruce Springsteen topic. Jay Armstrong is an honors English teacher. He just recently retired, and he would spend 2 days with his honors English class breaking apart the song Thunder Road as a poem. They would go through all the imagery. They would talk about the themes Bruce used, would compare it to Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken, and other poems. And at the end of the 2 days, he asks his class, does Mary get in the car? So Michael, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Well, first thing is school is a lot more exciting than it was when I was there.
Yes. Isn't that a great teacher? Wouldn't that, yeah.
Well, okay. So first off, I love the idea. I've always loved the idea of that song just as it is. And I
Yes.
love the idea of the ambiguity at the end. You don't know whether she gets in the car, and that's what I love about it. I love the ending of The Sopranos. You know, I love the
Yes,
way
exactly.
you didn't know what happened. So
Right.
I like things to remain unanswered. That being said,
And by the way, that is a valid answer. If that's where you want to go, if you want to say, I don't want to know, I think it's up to, it's like the Lady and the Tiger, right?
yeah.
So, yeah.
But that being said, I will say that
Okay.
I've always looked at Thunder Road as being the opening to a fantastically classic album that's all about movement, and it's called Born to Run. It's through the whole album. He's going through different phases. Now, it's not really a concept album, but it is. I see that character throughout that whole album.
Yes.
So I look at it as they are leaving. They're pulling out of here to win, and so they're leaving that town. They're born to run. Yes, Mary gets in the car because they start their journey with that song throughout the rest of the album.
Very nice.
There you go. That's my answer.
All right. And so one last thing, two things. Anytime I hear someone says I'm from Indiana, I said, did you leave in the back of a pickup truck? And when Charlie Watts died, I could not keep thinking of banging the kids in the back seat banging like Charlie Watts.
That's right.
I mean, that's all I could think of. Yeah, I mean, certainly the loss and everything, but just he has just been a wonderful musical. He has been someone who has been in my life, and I am so glad that someone took the time to write it. As I told you before we started recording, I'm up to 2-Bit Monsters in the book, so I've gone through a lot of it. I am enjoying the book. I urge all my listeners to go, whether you go to the local bookstore, you go to your online retailer, get it and enjoy it. It will make a wonderful Christmas present. Thank you, Michael. Whatever you're going to do, please keep me in mind. And hey, if you want to join me and we do a whole Springsteen episode, you can do that too if you want.
I was saying I love well, as you could tell already, I love Springsteen, and we could do that. And keep me in mind. And
I sure will. Yeah.
So.
All right, listeners, you please go get vaccinated. Stay safe. Remember to wear your mask. Remember to wash your hands. Let's all be good to each other, because that's the only way we're going to get through this. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, listeners. And we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. Set Listing Bruce has a Patreon page where you can offer to donate anything from $1 a month up to whatever amount you want. Thanks to the wonderful people who support the podcast through Patreon, I'm able to cover the cost of the Zoom recordings and the hosting of the podcast, putting it out, things like that. So thank you to Holly Mack, Steve Rogers, Dale Hosack, Terry Smith, Anna Lynn, Chris Bloom, Mary Thomas, Alex Samolta, Andrew Goddard, Betsy Hodges, Levi Petrie, Stephen Malio. Each of you are my Springsteen siblings. You are my angels, and I appreciate you so much. Thank you for all your support and love.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.